Alright guys, somebody give me a thumbs up and let me know if you can hear me now. Alright, let's try that. Kimball, can you hear me? Every time we try new technology, it seems like we get a little bit of difficulty. So hang tight. We'll let everybody get back on there. There's a nice shot of my hand. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in my fancy dancy stand here so we can get going. Alright. You guys good? Joel, you good? You hear me? Alright. You alright? Kimball, can you still hear me? Very good. Alright. Now hang tight for a second, guys. We'll let everybody get back on here and we'll get started. Alright, Joel, you got to give me a thumbs up. Kimball says they can hear me. We've got looks like about 30 people online, about 34 now. We'll go ahead and get started here in just a second. Hey everybody. Alright, very good. Hang tight. Alright, so let's get started, and I just want to do a few housekeeping things as we get going here. I understand that the video has a little bit of lag in it. Don't you worry about that. We're going to do something different on the presentation tonight. And you're only going to have to look at my fancy mugshot here for a little while. As some of you know from last night's broadcast, this is part 2 of a call to action. And for those of you who are on here, I hope you'll be sharing this with your friends. I hope you'll be swiping up and sharing this with Facebook, etc. Because what we're going to do tonight is we're going to talk about the details related to how do we build a reconstituted American Liberty League, how do we build an organized effort to really accomplish victory in the cause of liberty. And I have to just warn you in advance, tonight's presentation is not going to be entertaining. I'm not trying to make everybody feel good. I'm not trying to impress everybody with, antics or anything like that. This is a serious thing, and I want to start off tonight by telling you about a short conversation I had with a good friend of mine in the cause of liberty. We've all been watching the events today, Lavoy Finicum's funeral down in southern Utah today. A lot of people putting out calls to action, a lot of people asking questions about how do we do something besides just be angry and be frustrated. I mean, what can one individual do? What can a small group of people do? And last night I put out a very strong call to action. If you haven't listened to last night's broadcast, you're going to want to check back at freecapitalist.com, and you're going to want to watch that in its entirety. I don't have it published up there yet. We will work on getting that published here in the next 24 hours. This broadcast will be still available on Periscope for the next 24 hours. And in that call to action, I talked about some steps we are taking in building the American Liberty Society and in reconstituting an old organization started by patriots when America first started changing its trajectory, and reconstituting the American Liberty League. And that's a very bold undertaking, but it's only 1/7 of the whole undertaking. And tonight I want to talk to you about that, and I want to explain it to you. And the best way I can do that, again, I want to go back to this conversation I had a little bit earlier today with a friend of mine. He said, paraphrasing, he said, "Rick, I really respect you. I'm really glad to see what you're doing. I really feel like you're getting your voice out there, and a lot of people need to hear what you have to say and this kind of thing." And he goes, "And I really feel like we need what you're talking about. I really feel like the United States of America needs an organized effort that can actually win in our efforts to restore liberty and to restore the people of the United States to constitutional principles and to restore our government to constitutional principles. We are, of course, as I said last night, not anti-government. We're anti-corruption. We're anti-theft. We're anti-overreach. We're anti-unprincipled government because the tradition of America and our tradition as Americans is to be more principled and to be more morally upright and more courageous than all alternatives in government. That's what made America great. That's the American founder's story. You know that. Now, this friend of mine was saying, we need this, Rick. We need it. But he said, I have some questions. He's kind of discouraged. And I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, there are two questions I've got. He said, first of all, he said, there's so many liberty movements. There are so many little groups here and there. Constitution study groups here, and Oath Keepers there, and the Ron Paul groups here, and other political groups there, and patriot groups, and the 3%ers, and all this different kind of thing. And he says, and we spend all of our time fighting against each other, and we spend all of our time disagreeing with how to do things. And he says, I just don't know, how do you accomplish what you're talking about? How do you unite people? How do you get people together and really do anything meaningful? And then that was his first question. And I said, well, I have an answer to that. And his second question is also a very common question. His second question, he said, well, let me tell you first how I answered his first question. I said to him, look, the way I see it is all these small groups out there show that there is a market for liberty. There's a market for the message of liberty. I'm a capitalist. I believe in freedom and liberty. And so all of these groups out there are competing for attention and eyeballs and legitimacy and this kind of thing. And it shows us that there is a market out there. There is an appetite out there. People are hungry because, especially as our government gets more and more bloated, as the political parties, despite some very good leaders in a few instances nationally and statewide and locally, the momentum, the inertia, that trajectory we talked about last night is going in the wrong direction. And with all that happening, people are getting more alarmed, and with things like, for example, what happened to Lavoy Finicum. Even if you disagree with the protest and their strategy, you start thinking, why do we have so much militarization in our own domestic police forces? I mean, are the people the enemy of the government? And that this people are waking up and they're looking for answers. And so all these different groups is a good sign. It's a sign there's a healthy market for the message of liberty. But going to the root of his question, he says, well, how are we going to reconstitute the American Liberty League? How are we going to become a powerful force for good that can actually succeed? And I said to him, let's use an analogy. Do you remember what the world was like not long ago when we had Motorola and Nokia and BlackBerry and all these? You used to go into a cell phone store and there were all these equal competitors, and some people liked one brand and some people liked another, and to some extent we still have that, right? But then, bam, the iPhone came on the market and it changed everything. The iPhone, through innovation, leadership, and credibility, built a market. Now, there's all kinds of reasons why that happened, and the analogy breaks down a little bit, but I want you to follow this principle, that there's a concept in freedom, there's a concept in liberty that's called the leading force. And in the marketplace is going to allow people to choose freely what they want, goods and services and ideas. There's a marketplace of ideas. But when there are people who have a good idea, when someone has a better idea than everybody else and they can develop the leading force, they start to lead the market. And then you see the world now where there's just Android users and iOS users. And these leading agents, basically, in the marketplace have defined the game. Well, that's what I think is the next step in the freedom movement. We've got to step forward. Someone has got to step forward and lead and say, all right, you can all exist. You can all have your little groups, but here's what we're doing. If you would like to stay in your group, that's fine, but you can also come and join with us. Let us show you something that's going to radically change your perspective. And what we're going to do, and what we're constituting here with the American Liberty League, and what we're rolling forward with the American Liberty Society, is a bold vision. It's a much broader vision than these other patriot groups and these other liberty groups. And that's not an insult to them, right? They're our friends. They're our brothers and sisters. They're our fellow Americans who are trying to do good, and we want to support them. But we want to push a broader vision, and I want to share some of that with you tonight. So I said to my friend, I said, yeah, I'm not discouraged at all by that. Matter of fact, I'm encouraged, because these are the people we want to be speaking to, we want to get our message out, and we want to build the leading force. So then his second question to me was, well, Rick, yeah, I understand that, okay, that's great. He goes, but distance. He goes, in my neighborhood, there's not one person who would stand up for liberty no matter what the cost. There's not one person who's serious about the cause of liberty. Matter of fact, I have to tell you, I had a very good friend send me a video, I think kind of as a joke, after last night's broadcast. And it was a joke from Gallivant, where basically this guy is in a musical, and he's rooting on, the pitchforks and torches against the government. They're going to retake this government castle, and at first everybody's behind him, and he's talking about, the costs they're going to have to pay, the blood they're going to have to pay, and supposedly my friend thinks this is funny, but by the end of the song, everybody has turned around and run the other way, and this one guy's standing there, with his flag, and there's nobody left behind him. And, I think this friend of mine sent this to me because, they could sense yesterday in my broadcast this call to action, some very bold prescriptions for how we advocate lawful insurrections, and strategically how we can tactically do things and accomplish things much more effectively and be very powerful in this cause of liberty. And I think this friend of mine sensed that, that's a little scary, right? I mean, you're really going up against the government. That's a big bear. To quote my mother, that's a big bear you're poking there. And I get the humor of that, but I was mildly offended because this is so much more serious than that. What we've got to do is so much more real than that. Most of us are drunk with laziness. Most of us view the Liberty Fight as like another episode on Netflix, some other TV show that we like. We like to watch it and we like to cheer for it. We even like to talk about it with our friends once in a while. But you see, again, you may disagree with what was happening up in Oregon, but there are people who are dying and have died. Not just people in our military, though there are people in our military who die for liberty, die for freedom. But there are citizens in jail, there are citizens in prison because of government overreach and government overstretch, and because of corrupt bureaucrats, and because of corrupt political leaders, and because of corrupt prosecutors. The world around us in the United States is in a very serious condition. And I'm not a doom and gloom person, but I'm also not a denier of reality. And this isn't a joke. This isn't a hobby. And the reason I've invited you to participate in this broadcast and in these 3 parts that we talked about, these 3-part broadcasts, is because we're looking for people who understand how serious it is. And I said to my friend, I think there are people who will stand up when they realize you're serious and you're not just talking and you're not just politicizing. I believe there's a significant number of men and women spread across this land, and even some abroad, who feel the torch of liberty burning in them, who see the need for a principled organization. And I said to my friend, I said, they'll stand up when there's a credible movement. They'll stand up when someone legitimately establishes leadership and direction. Quite frankly, the best among us in the liberty movement are so lacking in conviction that they're a mess. A combination of wingnuts and half-serious people with half-baked ideas, and then a few real patriotic and passionate people with some good ideas, all mixed together does not a movement make. We've got to do better. We've got to up our game. And so what my call to you is, and what I'm asking you to spread to your friends and family, is a call to up our game. Get in the game. Matter of fact, I said to my friend, look, I haven't aligned with any of those groups. I wouldn't be starting something on my own. I wouldn't be purporting to lead something on my own if there was someone out there with a credible, comprehensive vision to restore this country to its constitutional moorings, to hold up the principles of the Declaration of Independence, to hold up the Constitution and say, this is our standard. And not just our standard in a militia, and not just our standard in a political movement, and not just our standard as a hobby, but a standard as a way of life. If there was someone else doing that credibly, right, I would go do that. But there isn't. And so with that said, tonight I'm going to share with you the answer to these two questions in a very detailed way. It's about 10:22 Mountain Time. I imagine I'll go for about an hour from now. And I hope you'll stay with me, and I hope you'll give me comments and ideas. You can give me comments on Facebook through Facebook Messenger. You can send me emails to rick@freecapitalist.com, and I'm happy to address your questions as we go forward. But you guys, this is serious, and what I'm about to share with you is a message that I'm hoping that you will share with others. It's a message that I'm hoping you will make your own, and that you will enlist with us in building this cause. Now, I told you last night that I wanted nominations for presidents, for chapter leaders in each state, chapter leaders for Utah, chapter leaders for Idaho, chapter leaders for California. I've told you to submit those nominations, and several people did. And we've now got sufficient nominations for Utah, for Idaho, for Colorado. Okay, I'm still looking for nominations from all of the other states. And so it's time to step up, my friends. And if it's not you, who is it? If it's not you and your group of friends, who is it? And I invite you to dial in tonight. I invite you to, when I say dial in, I mean focus in. I invite you to look at this message that I'm going to share with you very carefully. And then I invite you to take the action steps that I'm going to give you at the end of this presentation. 5 very specific action steps to help us move this movement. So with that said, let me just take a quick look and see if there are any questions before I get started and go into the formal presentation. So I'm getting a message from a friend that they're having some trouble with the video. I'd like a message from somebody on Periscope. Somebody send me an email or a Facebook message and let me know if the video is working all right for you. Somebody give me a thumbs up before I move forward. I'm checking everything on my end. It looks all right, so. Just a little lag. Yep, I know. There's just a little lag. So, all right. With that said, if all you got is audio, make the most of what you got. Be a capitalist. So I want to start off by asking you a question. I want to be real honest with you, and I'd like you to be real honest as you think about this question. And this question really determines whether this presentation is going to be something meaningful for you and for this movement. The question is, what do you see happening right now in the United States of America? When you look around, when you look at current events, when you look at social life, what's going on? What do you see? Because if you believe everything's okay in America, if you believe things are pretty good, we just need some minor repairs, if you think that we're on the right track in the United States with our government, and if you think we're on the right track with education, if you think we're on the right track in the economy, and if you think things are good for you and your family and your children in terms of pursuing the American dream, okay, then there's another problem that we need to address. You see, if you believe it's up to the government to address and fix the challenges that you see, and if you believe it's up to federal and state and city governments to get more involved, that the world's good, we just need the federal, state, and city governments to do a better job. They need to pass more laws. They need to fix the challenges. But, life's good. We're all good. If that's you, and if you trust that the solution rests in politicians and government leaders and government employees to change the world, if you think there needs to be some things going on in this country that you would like to see, right? You're just going to watch them on TV, and you're kind of watching a TV show, and you wish these politicians and bureaucrat and government employees would just change how the next episode comes out. And if you see that it's just your job to vote for the best candidate every year or two to make that happen, then let's just be real clear right up front. This presentation is not for you. That's not a joke. I'm not, just saying that. I mean, really. If you resonate with all that, if that's what you think, the rest of this presentation is going to be of no value to you. And so I invite you to respectfully say, hey guys, interesting group of people, but yeah, that's me, I think the world's pretty good. I think if the politicians and the bureaucrats do a little better job and repair some things and fix some things, if that's you, what I have to say for the rest of the night isn't of any value or of any use. Now, on the other hand, if you believe that being an American means having a shared set of values and a shared culture of individual liberty and self-government, and if you believe that these shared values and shared culture and these ideas of individual liberty and self-government are founded on the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States, then tonight I'd like to invite you to join an organization that, unless you've been following me for the last... If I have a Hershey bar and you have $1, okay, then these two things are assets. And consumers want them, right? But we have to decide sometimes whether we're willing to give up one for the other. Okay? And as we do that, we look at that Hershey bar and we say, oh, well, that looks good. And I say, okay, I've got a Hershey bar, you've got $1. I'll sell you the Hershey bar for $1. I give up the Hershey bar, you give me the $1. Question is, how much was that Hershey bar worth to you? We've been trained, taught, and educated to say, well, $1. Now, I just need to pause here. I can just sense it in the audience. You say, what does this have to do with freedom, Rick? This is freedom. Understanding this object lesson can change your life. This object lesson illustrates what liberty of conscience is all about. It illustrates the difference between Karl Marx and Thomas Jefferson. It illustrates the difference between America and the Soviet Union. You see, when you give up $1 to me in exchange for a candy bar, for the Hershey bar, what you're saying is that to you, at this time, in this place, under these circumstances, you would prefer to have the chocolate than the $1. And it's your choice. Anybody in the world could tell you, well, I wouldn't pay that much for it, I'd pay differently for it, or whatever. But when you are free to enter into that kind of transaction, what you're doing is you're exercising your power of choice and your values. And I know you think it's silly, but it works the same for cars and houses, and it works the same for politicians and land, and it works the same for principles. Once you get this concept, I'll show you how it can change everything, but just hang with me for a minute. How much was the Hershey bar worth to you if you paid $1 for it? Karl Marx would have you believe it was only worth $1. But that's clearly not true. Because if you placed the same value on the Hershey bar as you did on that piece of paper called the $1, you would never make the trade. Self-evidently, if you're willing to give up the $1 for the Hershey bar, you're saying, I value having the Hershey bar more than I value having the $1. So the Hershey bar, self-evidently, is worth more to you than the $1 at that time, at that place. And the opposite is true for me. The $1 is worth more to me than the Hershey bar. So when we're both free to exercise our own choice, we both get what we bargained for. And we both walk away with something we believed we valued more in exchange for something we valued less. And consumers don't like that. Because consumers want someone else to tell them how much things are really worth.
Because consumers don't know how much they should pay. They think there's a right answer or a wrong answer. So they want the government to come in and say, well, you need to license people so they can't sell things for more than they're really worth. You need to control people. You need to tell people how much they should pay so they don't get ripped off. I used to, in my seminars, buy candy bars with $100 bills. And I would ask how many in the audience think that I got ripped off, and many people would raise their hands, and I'd say, you're Karl Marx. Because a socialist believes, just like liberty comes from government, a socialist believes that all values come from government. A socialist believes that the value of the Hershey bar should be set by the government. Matter of fact, that's the mantra. A socialist wants the government to control all the means and resources of production and all of the assets and all the transactions in the economy. Because the socialist says, you don't get to choose. We're going to protect you. We're going to tell you what you should want. And that works great until you see things differently than your neighbor who works in the government. Until you say, I'd rather send my child to a private school than the public school. It's not worth it to me. Or until you say, I'd rather have a pickup than a passenger car. Or I'd rather have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house than a condo. And you see, in a socialist society, the idea is, well, we the people are going to decide. In a socialist society, you're trained, taught, and educated to call it a democracy. And you say, we're all just going to vote on what everybody should want and what everybody should value. Oh, they don't tell it to you that way. They call it freedom, but it's freedom given by the government. Watch this. Just watch this. Consumers in the scarcity condition in this view, they are constantly concerned about financial things because they're always in debt, they're always in bondage, they do not understand prosperity, they actually have been trained, taught, and educated to believe that prosperity is evil and wicked and immoral. They believe that money is power, but it's immoral. So they crave the little money they do have, and they begrudge the people who have more than them. They live in a constant fear of losing the things that they have. They want the government to come in and protect them from losing. They're constantly paralyzed in terms of making decisions, and they always want to avoid risk or pay for risk. Now, this is socialism. This is groupthink. This is victimization. And it is legion. It is in our small children, and it is in our old senior citizens, because this philosophy, some people call it the Great Depression thinking, this is our enemy. This is the doctrine of those who would destroy. You see, there's a different view of liberty. I sometimes call it the producer paradigm, and it's a view that says our things come from God, our values are accountable to God, our rights are endowed before any government exists, that we actually create government because we have an abundance of rights to protect. We value assets because we want to utilize them, not because we want to own and accumulate them. We believe in control and stewardship. We believe in creating value and increasing and producing. We believe that when we have a stewardship, the question is, what use can we make of the things that we have? We believe in profit and equity. We believe in knowledge, that knowledge is power, and that even if a person doesn't have money, knowledge is the path forward. We believe that faith in principles, not a fear of loss and a turning to government, is how we should act. We believe that we should manage our own risk, and that's capitalism. That's a lifetime of being a student of freedom, of being an agent for ourselves, of living the hero's life, not the victim's life. My friends, I could give you days worth of lectures on this, but these two paradigms are the choice we have every day of our life. And if you want to be part of a liberty movement, if you want to be part of saving the Constitution, if you want to be part of saving this nation, this exercise, choosing between these two paradigms, day in and day out, is the ritual, it's the rigum, it's the regime, it's the path forward. Because once you understand those, you can pursue the proper ordering of three core values. You see, the largest sphere of our concern should be self-reliance and self-government. When we're faced with problems or difficulties or challenges, the largest area of our concern and our value should be to rely first on ourselves and governing ourselves. Then within that, in the liberty movement, we turn to family and family government. So if we're going to reform the nation, we start with reforming our self-government, the choice between those two paradigms, and then we reform our families and our